LaGuardia from The Economist newspaper. I've got two questions which I hope I can just drag out some more detail from our panelists. To Ms. Westby, you talked about the applicability of the laws of war and whether the Geneva Conventions could be extended to critical infrastructure. How would that work given that critical infrastructure such as power stations, communication systems are often the first target in a war under the current laws? And to Mr. Liu, the debate about cybersecurity is often suffused with a sense of a threat from China. And I was wondering whether you could talk about your sort of interesting point that China is in fact a victim. Can you spell out in what ways you see yourselves as a victim and in what ways you would seek help from the developed world? Thank you.
Okay, well, so I think that when we look at the international legal framework for armed conflict, and we look at the Geneva Convention and protecting critical infrastructure, military networks could be legitimate targets. Certainly in Iraq, the first things we did in both Iraqi invasions was to attack the communications infrastructure. The United States also had a plot in 1982 where we planted backdoors in software for control of turbines and engines and valves of pipelines and sold them to Russia, and then at a point we activated them and it caused the largest explosion seen from Earth since the Hiroshima bomb. So the U.S. is probably engaged in cyber warfare openly more than any other country in the world. But that doesn't mean that it's okay. And I don't think it's okay to attack critical infrastructures. When everybody in hospitals and newborn babies and elderly people and sick people are dependent upon those infrastructures and therefore our entire social network. If it's a military infrastructure, okay, but I think certain commercial infrastructures are not. Now, the complicating point here, and one that's very interesting, is when you look at countries like China and Vietnam and Russia, where infrastructure is owned 100% by the private sector. Then you have a real problem because the Department of Defense doesn't own those weapons, and they don't know how to pull the trigger, and they don't have their soldiers inside of them operating them. But China does. They own their networks, they have their own people inside, and they know how to operate them. So it's a strategic, offensive and defensive advantage, and it's a critical point we have to look at. If the infrastructure is protected, then we have a level playing field.
China is really a major victim of cyber attacks and network viruses. According to the research of my organization, the China Internet Media Research Center, the total economic losses for China each year is about $1 billion US. That's a lot. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Dave Weitzel from MITRE and co-chair of Jody Westby's committee. Two comments and a question. First comment, there's a recent IIHL Rules of Engagement handbook that actually mentions cyber for folks that are interested in law of armed conflict. It's an interesting read. Also, cyber is mentioned in the new Manual on International Law applicable to air and missile warfare. So this is a topic that's of interest to the international legal community that deals with law of armed conflict. Second, and then my question, mostly for Jody Westby, cyber laws, okay, we'll pass them, but what are we supposed to do? Because we need cyber cops, cyber investigators, and cyber prosecutors.
Well, I think that the developed nations have a great responsibility to go out and train people in developing countries. When we only have 50 countries out of 246 that are part of the 24/7 high-tech crime network, to me that's a huge gap. This isn't rocket science. It's go out and help these countries have trained people, help them have understanding of how to cooperate, how to assist in cyber investigations. And that gap should be closed, and it should be closed within the next 2 years. And that could be a goal that EastWest Institute could take up.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, again, I'm going to go back to what I said before. The starting point is making the social, ethical, philosophical decision. This is what's right. Then following that with the economic framework to make this that is right economically viable. and then the technology can come in. I mean, we have the capabilities. There's digital forensic capabilities. There's some incredible capabilities that are out there. It's a matter of the economics associated with it. So the starting point is actually establishing the social will, that this is important, and we are going to manifest the social will in some type of law, and then ensure that the economic playground is one that supports that social will.
Well, thank you, Jim, and I will ask now all of our panelists to come with a short final thought or even a sentence that you think it's important to use as a slogan of what we're trying to achieve here. How to build international consensus in cyberspace. Matt.
I would say we take the breakout sessions this afternoon, take them serious, roll up your sleeves, lose the jacket, and get to work with the people that are in the rooms with you to hammer out some concrete actions that we can take. I, for one, believe that this is imminently addressable. I think that when we paint it with a broad brush, it looks confusing and complex. But when we take it into the components, and some of the components that have been laid out in the breakout sessions, we can make measurable progress in creating trust, whether it is at the component level, the infrastructure level, the measurements, and this notion that my colleague is kept thumping on, and that is a common sense of what good looks like. So anyway, I challenge everyone to, I see some people have actually already lost the jackets. Let's roll up our sleeves and work through the programs. And next year here, should we have the opportunity to attend, we're seeing the progress that we've made in key areas of increasing the level of cybersecurity for our world.
Thank you, Jim.
There's a term, I'm going to date myself a little bit, in the computer industry called SMOP, small matter of programming. The fact of the matter is, all of these problems are simply SMOP. They literally are a small matter of programming. We can solve these problems. What's missing are what are the problems we're trying to solve? And that is a social decision. That's not a technology decision. And I would like everybody, when they're looking at these, trying to decide what are the social, philosophical, ethical, moral issues, what is right? And then the technology and private enterprise with the appropriate economic framework can solve them.
Thank you, Jim.
I think there's no simple solution to cybersecurity issue. We should work together and work harder to have a safer cyberspace. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think when we talk about who should be involved, obviously it's governments, but it's also donor organizations who are not active in this space. They cared about bridging the digital divide, but they connected the world and created a security divide, because now we have 246 countries and territories, but we don't have security in them. The NGOs and the civic leaders as well. Clearly the government point has to be at the United Nations. Since 1998, Russia's taken a leading role in that, interestingly enough, with a resolution on developments in the field of information and telecommunications in the context of international security. It's called for multilateral discussions about how to basically control the use of cyberspace for cyber stability. The United States regularly voted against it. Last year it was adopted by the General Assembly and the First Committee over the sole objection of the United States. I think that's embarrassing. I understand that our State Department now has conferred with Russia, and we're ready to support this resolution in this round of General Assembly, and I think that's a very good start. So I think now it's time for all of us to push harder for donor organization involvement, for activities in development countries, for more activity by NGOs like the World Federation of Scientists and EastWest Institute, and for civic leaders to step up and start addressing the general public and helping them know what to do.
Well, thank you very much, Judy. I personally found myself much more optimistic after this panel.